The man by the fountain. The sun was already high over the city when people began gathering at the park, their footsteps echoing across the stone paths like scattered music. It was a Thursday, ordinary for most. A mix of mothers with strollers, tired office workers on lunch break, and tourists snapping pictures near the old fountain at the center. But for one man, this Thursday carried more weight than anyone could see. His name was Farhan. He was in his late 30s, thin and quiet, with the kind of eyes that held stories far longer than his smile ever revealed. Each morning, he set up a small stand beside the fountain, not much more than a foldable stool and a pole with a dozen balloons tied to it, their bright colors swaying with the breeze. Farhan didn't speak much. He didn't call out to customers. He simply waited, standing patiently under the sun, hoping someone would stop long enough to notice the small paper sign he had written in careful handwriting. Balloons. Any color. Pay what you wish. Every coin mattered. Every dollar made the difference between another meal and another excuse. His son, Zaid, was only 6. Wide-eyed and full of questions, the boy had a smile so pure it could melt iron. And Farhan would do anything to protect that smile, even if it meant selling balloons for hours each day, no matter the weather. He never begged, never complained. He simply stood, hoping kindness would walk his way before hunger did. On that day, the park was more crowded than usual. A small film crew was shooting something nearby, drawing attention and creating noise. Farhan paid no mind. His eyes stayed on the path, scanning for children, for couples, for anyone who might find joy in a balloon. An hour passed, then 2. Only 3 balloons had sold. Farhan's throat was dry. He reached for his water bottle only to find it empty. He sighed and sat on the edge of the fountain, stretching his tired legs. And that's when he heard the voice. "Excuse me. How much for the red one?" Farhan turned. The man standing before him wore a baseball cap pulled low, dark sunglasses, and a calm, steady presence. He looked familiar in a way that tugged at memory, but Farhan was too tired to place it. He smiled faintly and said what he always said. "You can pay what you wish. Just choose the one you like." The man nodded slowly, choosing the red balloon and pulling a crisp $50 bill from his pocket. Farhan blinked. "Sir, that's too much. $1's fine." But the man handed him the bill without hesitation. "Then consider the rest for the story behind the red one." Farhan was stunned into silence. He took the bill with both hands, his voice caught in his throat. "Thank you. Truly." The man smiled. "Your son, does he like balloons too?" Farhan nodded. "He loves them. He thinks they're magic." The man chuckled. He might be right. Before Farhan could say more, the man waved gently and walked off, disappearing into the crowd with the balloon floating behind him like a slow, drifting wish. Farhan sat there for a while, the bill still in his hand, wondering why the encounter left him feeling both light and heavy. Later that evening, Farhan returned home to their small apartment, tucked above a hardware store on a street most people passed without seeing. Zaid ran to the door, throwing his arms around his father with a kind of excitement that never faded, even on days with no toys or sweets. Baba, did you sell many balloons?" "Some," Farhan smiled. "But one man bought a red one, and he gave us this." He held up the $50 bill. Zaid's eyes widened. "That's magic money, Baba. Maybe he was a king." Farhan laughed. "Maybe." But deep down, he wondered, who was that man? The next day, Farhan returned to the park. The fountain sang its usual song and the tourists came and went. But he couldn't stop scanning the faces, searching for the man in the cap. He never came. Not that day. Not the next. But something else happened. 2 women approached, asking if he was the balloon man from the nice post. "What post?" Farhan asked. They showed him a phone. A photo of him holding the red balloon. The caption read, "I met a man selling joy today. He didn't ask for a price. He just asked for kindness. These are the real heroes." The name on the post was a mystery, no tag, no clue, but the image had gone viral. By the end of the day, more people came, not just for balloons, but for something deeper. They asked about his story. They bought balloons even when they didn't need them. Someone offered to buy him lunch. A child handed him a crayon drawing of the fountain. And all the while, Farhan remained humble, confused, overwhelmed. He went home that night with empty hands, not a single balloon left, and Zaid waited with wide eyes. "Did the king come back, Baba?" Farhan knelt down and pulled the crayon drawing from his pocket. "No, but he sent the whole kingdom." And still Farhan didn't know. The man who had started it all and was watching from a distance. A film set, a quiet bench, sunglasses and a cap, Keanu Reeves, watching the world react to a man who asked for nothing and gave everything. But what Farhan didn't know was that life was about to change, because someone was planning something much bigger. For him, for Zaid, and for the story that was only just beginning. The man behind the smile the next morning, Farhan arrived at the park earlier than usual. He didn't bring more balloons. He brought all the balloons. Bright reds, soft blues, yellows that shimmered like sunshine, greens that swayed like the leaves above. Zaid had helped him blow them up before dawn, their tiny apartment filled with color and laughter. They didn't know why people had started coming, but Farhan knew enough to be prepared. And he was right. By the time the clock struck 10, the first customer had already arrived. A little girl with missing front teeth and a dollar clutched tightly in her fist. But the girl wasn't alone. By noon, the park felt like a festival. Couples with cameras, parents with children, even a street musician who decided to set up nearby just to add some cheer. Everyone wanted to meet the balloon man. Everyone had seen the viral photo. Some brought gifts. Others brought stories. One man, dressed in a three-piece suit, came just to give Farhan a hug. He said his wife had cried when she saw the post. "Your face," he told Farhan, reminded her that good still lives out here. Farhan didn't know what to say. He just smiled the same way he always had. Humbly, with gratitude and disbelief stitched into every wrinkle at the corners of his eyes. And yet, through it all, no one could identify who had made the post. It was anonymous, posted under a handle, with no photo, no bio, just one sentence in the profile. Kindness is never wasted. But across the park, in a shaded corner near the old stone steps, sat the man who knew. Sunglasses still on, baseball cap pulled low. Keanu Reeves watched from a distance, occasionally taking slow sips from a coffee cup that had gone cold. He wasn't here for recognition. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here to see him, the balloon man, the father, the quiet soul who didn't realize the whole world had started to lean in closer because of him. Keanu had returned because the story had reached him in a way no movie script had. There was something about Farhan, something gentle, rare. He had seen fame twist people, break them, rebuild them into something hollow. But Farhan was different. He had nothing, yet carried himself like a man who owned the sky. And now, the world was slowly waking up to that light. What Keanu didn't expect was for the story to start shifting. By the afternoon, two men in suits showed up near the fountain. They didn't buy balloons. They didn't smile. They just stood there whispering, watching. Farhan noticed them too, though he tried not to let it show. He had learned long ago that people who stare too long without warmth usually bring more trouble than kindness. And he was right. The two men were from the city council. Apparently, someone had reported his stand as an unlicensed business. They approached him just before sunset, pulling out a clipboard and speaking in tones that tried to sound polite but carried a sting beneath the words. "You'll need to apply for a vendor permit," one said. "This area is regulated and we can't have unauthorized sales." Farhan nodded slowly. "I don't have a license, but I'm not making much, just a few balloons a day." "We understand," the other added, without real understanding. "But rules are rules. You'll need to stop selling until the paperwork's cleared." And just like that, the magic paused. The crowd dispersed slowly, unsure of what had just happened. Farhan stood by the fountain, balloons still tied to the pole, now swaying in silence. Zaid wasn't with him today. He had stayed home with a neighbor, and Farhan was grateful for that. Grateful that his son didn't have to see this part of the story. Keanu stood too. Quiet. Still. He had seen enough. He didn't approach Farhan that night. He let the man pack up in silence, watched him tie the leftover balloons to the railings one by one, like he was leaving behind little promises of hope even as he was being told to go. But Keanu didn't leave either. Instead, he made a phone call. Not to an agent, not to the press, to an old friend, someone in the mayor's office, someone who owed him a favor. "I need a small permit pushed through," Keanu said plainly. "No headlines, just paperwork, and fast." The next morning, Farhan returned to the park anyway. He brought no balloons. He just sat by the fountain, unsure what else to do with his hands, with his heart. The silence was louder than usual. The stares were different today, curious, distant. And then just before noon, a city official approached. A woman this time with kind eyes and a file in her hand. "Farhan?" He stood, confused. "Yes?" She smiled. "This is for you. You've been approved for a lifetime street vendor permit. No cost. Fully licensed to sell at this location." Farhan blinked, stunned. "How? Who?" She smiled again. "A friend of the city made a request. He insisted it remain anonymous." And just like that, the air returned to the park. The colors came back. The balloons floated again. But Farhan didn't know. Not yet. He didn't know that a man with a cap and sunglasses had been sitting nearby all morning, watching the moment quietly, before finally standing to leave. But this time Farhan noticed him. Really noticed him. Something clicked in his heart. A flicker of recognition. Not just the face. The soul behind it. He took a step forward, and Keanu paused. Farhan opened his mouth to speak. But before a word could leave his lips, a woman screamed. Someone had collapsed by the edge of the fountain, and Keanu was already running. The day the balloon man Ranthi scream cut through the park, like a blade. In seconds, the joy and calm of the midday crowd dissolved into gasps and hurried footsteps. A young mother had collapsed beside the fountain. Her baby stroller tipped slightly on the slope of the pavement, and panic was already seizing the people nearest. Some backed away. Others froze. But two men moved instantly. One was Keanu Reeves. The other, Farhan. Without hesitation, Keanu dropped to his knees beside the woman, checking her pulse with calm urgency, while Farhan dashed toward the stroller, catching it just before it rolled too far. He steadied the baby, who was crying but unhurt. With shaking hands, he gently scooped the child into his arms, holding the infant close as if it were his own. His heart thundered in his chest, not from fear, but from something older. The instinct to protect. "She's breathing," Keanu said, looking up. "But she's dehydrated. Maybe heat exhaustion." Someone called an ambulance. Others gathered at a distance, watching the scene unfold like a movie. Except there were no cameras, no script, just a father holding a stranger's child, and a quiet actor doing what needed to be done without waiting for applause. When the paramedics arrived, they took over quickly. The baby was placed back in the stroller, and the woman, still unconscious, was gently lifted onto a stretcher. Farhan lingered for a moment, watching as the scene resolved. Then he turned back toward the man in the cap. Keanu was already walking away, but Farhan wasn't going to let the moment pass this time. He caught up. "Sir?" he said softly. "Wait." Keanu stopped, turned. Their eyes met. And Farhan saw him clearly for the first time. Not just the actor, but the man. The one who had changed everything quietly. Who had sparked a movement with a balloon and a smile. Farhan's voice cracked as he spoke. "You helped me, didn't you?" Keanu hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I just bought a balloon. You saved my stand, the permit, the post, everything. That was you." Keanu shrugged gently. Sometimes, the smallest things ripple the farthest. Farhan didn't know how to respond. He had imagined this moment 100 different ways, but now that it was here, he could only feel the weight of gratitude settling into his chest. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why would someone like you help someone like me?" Keanu looked at him for a long moment, then said in a quiet voice, "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. Because I know what it means to need and not ask. And because your son deserves to grow up seeing kindness win." Those words hit Farhan deeper than any act of charity could. His eyes burned with unspoken emotion. He extended his hand and Keanu took it. No cameras, no press, just a handshake between two men who understood what it meant to carry the quiet burdens of life and still choose to smile. But what neither of them saw was the person filming from across the street. A shaky phone camera, a voice whispering, "That's Keanu Reeves, with the balloon guy." Within hours, the clip hit the internet, and unlike the first anonymous post, this one had faces. It had names. It had a headline waiting to explode. By sunset, news vans were circling the block. Calls were coming in. Reporters were digging through every detail of Farhan's life. What had once been a gentle story of kindness had now become a media gold rush. Zaid saw it first. His little hands gripped the television remote as the news anchor smiled into the camera. The mystery man behind the viral balloon story revealed, and the shocking star who's been helping him from the shadows, Keanu Reeves. Farhan didn't even have time to react. His phone buzzed with messages, missed calls, notifications. Some were offers, book deals, interviews, sponsorships. Others were less kind. People accusing him of orchestrating it all for attention. The tide of praise had come, but now the tide of scrutiny had begun. That night, Farhan sat in his small kitchen, head in his hands, the balloons limp and tangled, in the corner. Zaid came in quietly, holding the drawing he had made that morning, a picture of the park, the fountain, and two figures holding balloons side by side. "Baba," he asked, "are we in trouble?" Farhan looked at his son, then pulled him close. "No, Habibi, we're just in the middle of a very big wave." Meanwhile, Keanu was sitting alone in a darkened hotel room. He had seen the clip, heard the anchors. He had been through this before. He knew how fast people turned moments into noise and how noise drowned out meaning. But he also knew what he had to do next. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. A friend, now the head of a small non-profit, focused on underprivileged families. "I need to start something," Keanu said, quietly, in their name. No press. The voice on the other end said, "Just tell me where to begin." And so, as the headlines boiled, two things were quietly set in motion. One was a foundation with no name yet. The other was a choice, because Farhan was about to be offered something no balloon seller had ever imagined. A life-changing opportunity, but only if he was willing to step into a world where kindness came at a cost. The offer behind the curtain, the next morning, arrived with a strange kind of silence. It wasn't peace. It was the hush that comes right before a storm decides whether to pass over or break everything in its path. Farhan didn't go to the park that day. He sat by the window in their apartment, watching the clouds thicken, hearing the occasional murmur of a reporter's voice echoing from the street below. They had found him. Some knocked politely. Others waited, hoping to catch a glimpse or a quote. And Farhan, who once stood for hours just to sell a balloon, now found himself hiding behind thin curtains, trying to protect something far more fragile than income. His dignity. Zaid colored on the floor beside him, unaware of the full weight pressing on his father's shoulders. Children are like that. They live moment to moment. They see joy in crayons and stories and don't yet recognize the pressure behind drawn blinds and whispered calls. Then the phone rang. Farhan let it ring once, twice. He almost didn't answer. But something in him, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, told him to pick it up. "Hello. Is this Farhan?" A woman's voice. Calm, professional. "Yes," he said quietly. "My name is Rebecca Jennings. I represent a global brand interested in your story. We'd love to discuss a partnership, full sponsorship, your own branded stand, social campaigns, a speaking tour. We believe you and your son represent something the world needs: hope, resilience, sincerity. Farhan blinked. He didn't know how to respond. And, she added smoothly, we'd like Keanu Reeves involved. He's part of why this story matters, yes? Farhan's breath caught. We'd handle everything, Rebecca continued. You'd never have to sell another balloon unless you wanted to. We're offering you and Zaid financial freedom, education, a future. He sat in silence. The words echoed like a drumbeat. Freedom, future, sponsorship, Keanu. Everything sounded too big, too fast. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, she replied. But this offer won't stay open forever. As soon as he hung up, he felt it. The pull, not just of money or fame, but of escape. The temptation to step out of struggle and into something brighter. But something else tugged at him too. Doubt. Fear that the moment they took control of his story, they would reshape it into something he didn't recognize. He had spent his life surviving without noise. Could he survive inside it? Later that evening, he took Zaid for a walk. They wore hoodies, trying to blend in. Farhan didn't speak of the offer. Instead, they walked past the fountain. The balloons were gone. So were the crowds. The park was quiet again, almost like it had been waiting for them to return. Not as performers, but as people. And there, under the old oak tree, sat Keanu. No cameras, no fanfare, just him, waiting. Farhan approached slowly. Keanu looked up and smiled. Heard they found you, he said. They found both of us, Farhan replied. They want to turn it into something. Keanu nodded, understanding more than most would. That's what they do. Farhan hesitated, then sat beside him on the bench. They offered everything: money, sponsorship, a future for Zaid, and they want you involved too. Keanu looked at him, eyes steady. What do you want, Farhan? That question, so simple, so direct, landed like a stone in his chest. I want my son to be safe, to have chances I never had, to live without shame, Farhan said softly. But I don't want him to grow up thinking his story is something to be sold. Keanu nodded. Then don't sell it. Build something with it. Farhan looked at him confused. What do you mean? Don't sign your story away to someone else, Keanu said. Use it to create something you believe in. I'll help. Quietly. No cameras. Just a foundation, something in your name. Your values? Your voice. Farhan stared ahead at the fountain, the place where it all began. I wouldn't know where to start. Keanu smiled. You started the moment you gave that balloon away for whatever someone could give. The rest is just scaling kindness. The next day, Farhan met with Rebecca Jennings. She had flown in personally, expecting to close the deal. She wore a perfect suit, carried a digital presentation, and smiled like she already had him in her pocket. Mr. Farhan, she began, we're so excited to have you on board. He smiled back gently. Thank you, but I'm not signing. She blinked. I don't understand. I'm starting something different, he said. A foundation. We'll help families like mine, sell our own balloons in our own way. No hashtags, no scripts, just real help. Her smile faltered. This will pass. The attention, the audience. Maybe, he said. But kindness doesn't have to be loud to last. And with that, he walked away. Not because he didn't need what she offered, but because he believed in something more powerful. Ownership of his truth. That week, the Balloon of Hope Foundation quietly launched with 3 goals: feeding struggling families, supporting street vendors, and offering education grants to single parents. No celebrity endorsements, just community. But at the launch event, held quietly in the park by the fountain, one man stood at the back. Cap pulled low, sunglasses on, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak. He didn't stay long. But Farhan saw him and smiled. Because even without a word, he knew who had made it all possible. The balloon that reached the sky, the foundation's first week, passed like a slow sunrise. Not sudden, but steady, beautiful in its own unfolding. The park was no longer just a place to sell balloons. It had become a meeting ground for stories, for small acts of giving, for families who had been forgotten by systems and remembered by a stranger with a quiet soul and a colorful stand. People came not because the story had gone viral, but because they felt something real in it, something untouched by sponsorships or fame. There were no celebrities holding microphones, no branded banners hanging on the trees. Just Farhan and Zaid, now joined by volunteers who had once been strangers but now called each other family. A mother who had once walked by with nothing now helped manage supplies. A teenager who used to sleep 2 streets over now handed out snacks to kids. The foundation didn't change the world overnight, but it changed people's days. And sometimes that was more than enough. Farhan had found a rhythm again, not of survival, but of purpose. He woke up each morning with more than just hope. He had direction. He had ownership of a story that others had tried to buy, twist, and package. And every evening, when he closed the small wooden booth they had built beside the fountain, he did so with peace in his chest. But peace rarely stays untouched, for long, one rainy afternoon, a letter arrived at the small office space the foundation rented. It wasn't sent by email. It wasn't posted through social media. It came in a brown envelope with a gold seal and a handwritten note inside. To Mr. Farhan Khan and the Balloon of Hope Foundation, you are cordially invited to the Unity Humanitarian Awards. You've been nominated for the Beacon of Kindness honor. Farhan blinked, reading the letter again and again. He didn't know how they'd heard about him. He didn't even know there were awards for kindness. But what struck him more than anything was the second note tucked behind the invitation, a small card, written in pen. Go. Not for the cameras, for the others like you. They need to know kindness can win. Farhan didn't need to. Guess who K was? And so, for the first time in his life, he boarded a plane. Zaid sat beside him, pressing his forehead to the window, marveling at clouds. Farhan held his son's hand the entire flight, feeling like he was holding the child, and the weight of the story that brought them there. The award ceremony was a different world, velvet ropes, flashing lights, famous faces whose names Farhan had only ever heard from broken televisions and barbershops. He wore a borrowed suit. Zaid wore a too big bow tie, and together they stepped onto the carpet like 2 figures who didn't belong, and yet somehow belonged more than anyone else. When Farhan's name was called, the hall quieted. He walked slowly to the stage, Zaid clinging to his side, too nervous to let go. And as they reached the podium, the applause grew not in volume, but in warmth. It wasn't loud like it was for actors or musicians. It was deep, respectful. Felt, Farhan stood behind the microphone, overwhelmed. The lights were bright. The cameras pointed like eyes that never blinked. He cleared his throat. I sold balloons to feed my son, he began. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have much at all. But people stopped, not because I asked them to, but because kindness lives inside all of us, even when we forget it's there. He paused, took Zaid's hand again. A stranger once bought a balloon and changed my life. Not with money, but with a moment of grace. And I stand here today not because I earned this stage, but because someone believed in me when they didn't have to. The room was silent now, not out of disinterest, but out of respect. People weren't listening to a speech. They were listening to a man who had kept his dignity when the world offered a price for it. I don't want this story to be about me, Farhan said. I want it to be about every single father who sells hope one smile at a time. Every mother who folds lunch with fingers that tremble. Every child who thinks balloons might still be magic. He looked straight ahead, not at the audience, but past the lights. And to the stranger who never took credit, this is for you. The room rose. Not a standing ovation, a quiet one. The kind that doesn't need noise to say something has landed. Afterward, in the hallway behind the stage, Farhan stood holding the small crystal award. Zaid had fallen asleep on a couch nearby. The night was quiet again. And then, footsteps. He turned. Keanu was there. No cameras, no team, just him. You spoke well, Keanu said gently. I just spoke the truth, Farhan replied. Keanu smiled. Those are rare these days. They sat together. Two men on a hallway bench, neither looking for headlines, both carrying a story they had built together, without ever really meaning to. Thank you, Farhan said. For the permit, for the letter, for the first balloon. Keanu shook his head. You did the rest. All I did was notice. They sat in silence for a while, and then Keanu stood. I've got to catch a flight. But before I go, something for Zaid. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small envelope. Don't open it now. Give it to him when he's older. Farhan nodded, overwhelmed. Again, Keanu looked back once, hand raised in farewell. And just like that, he was gone. But Farhan knew now. Some people don't stay long. They just pass through your life the way a balloon floats upward, brief, beautiful, unforgettable. The balloon never fell years past like pages turning in a quiet book. The park changed, but the fountain remained. The balloon stand became a fixture, no longer temporary, no longer fragile. Children came and went, families grew, and the story of the man who sold joy for whatever you can give began to fade from headlines but never from hearts. Farhan no longer stood alone by the fountain. Now there was a small team. Mothers, students, dreamers. All of them once helped, now helping. They didn't sell balloons for money anymore. They gave them to anyone who needed a reason to smile. The sign had changed too. It now read, Balloons of Hope. Take one if today feels too heavy. Zaid grew fast. The little boy who once believed balloons were magic now ran the Foundation's youth wing. He still smiled the same, wide, unguarded, but his questions were bigger. He spoke at schools, held kindness drives, helped design programs to teach other kids about empathy. People asked if he missed the fame, the moment when he and his father were on TV. But Zaid always said the same thing. The real story happened after the cameras left. One spring morning on his 18th birthday, Farhan handed Zaid a small box. Not wrapped, just plain, simple, and old. Inside was the envelope Keanu had given them so many years ago. Zaid looked at it curiously. Is it money? Farhan chuckled. No. Something rarer. Zaid opened it gently. Inside was a single folded letter, yellowed at the edges, handwritten. Steady. Dear Zaid, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the kind of young man your father always believed you'd be. I don't know where you'll go or what you'll do, but I know this. Never trade your truth for a spotlight. Never forget the power of quiet kindness. I gave you one balloon. You turned it into a sky full. Thank you for reminding the world that soft things are strong too. Keanu read the letter twice, then a third time. And when he looked up, his father wasn't crying, but his eyes were glassy, as if holding back years of unspoken gratitude. Do you think he's still out there? Zaid asked softly. Farhan nodded. People like that don't disappear, they just show up in different ways. And they were right, because 1 month later a quiet donation appeared in the Foundation's account. No name, no contact, just a note. For the next little boy selling magic he doesn't even know he holds. Farhan and Zaid didn't try to trace it, they didn't need to. Instead, they held a new event at the park. Not an award ceremony, not a media campaign, just a day of giving. They tied 1,000 balloons to the trees, the benches, the railing around the fountain. On each balloon was a tag that read, If someone once believed in you, pass it on. Children ran through the park, laughter echoing, like wind chimes. Strangers hugged. A homeless man sat with a sandwich handed to him by a child. A girl danced under the tree, holding 2 balloons and giving one to her little brother. And Farhan, older now, a bit slower, sat quietly beside the fountain. He didn't say much. He just watched. Not the way some men watch to control or to remember. He watched the way a gardener watches a flower bloom long after he's forgotten where he planted the seed. Behind him, A tourist snapped a photo. "Who's that man?" they asked a volunteer. The girl smiled. "That's Farhan. He gave away a balloon once and ended up changing the way we all breathe." The tourists tilted their head. "Isn't there a story about an actor?" "Keanu Reeves," the girl nodded. "But he never wanted the credit. He just wanted to help." The tourist smiled. "Where is he now?" The girl looked around. "Who knows? Maybe still watching. Maybe resting. Maybe helping someone else." That night, as the park emptied and the last balloons floated above like quiet prayers, Farhan closed his eyes. He saw a memory. A man in a cap and sunglasses handing him $50 for a red balloon. He had never taken a photo with him, had never posted his name, but his life had been changed forever. And that was the thing about kindness. It didn't ask for credit. It didn't wait for recognition. It just kept moving, from hand to hand, from heart to heart. As the moon rose, a soft breeze tugged one last balloon loose. It floated up, away from the park, away from the city. High, above everything, and somewhere in some quiet corner of the world, a man saw it drift across the sky and smiled.